Email todaycb@rte.ie.
Thank you to the meat industry workers who spoke to Brian and allowed us to bring you that today. I want to go to Michael McNamara, Independent TD for Clare and Chair of the Oireachtas COVID-19 Committee. Michael McNamara, you've been listening to that report. What did you make of it?
Well, I mean, it was very disappointing, but not unfortunately entirely surprising from what we've heard at the COVID-19 Committee, both from SIP2 and from the Independent Workers Union and from the Migrant Rights Centre. The whole COVID pandemic has laid bare a number of structural weaknesses in Ireland, underinvestment in our healthcare system, overcrowded classrooms, and also the special position that meat plants appear to enjoy in the Irish state and with regard to Irish government structures. Obviously, the permit system as it operates results in workers being almost in bonded labour. I mean, they feel they can't leave their employment to move on to somebody else. Technically they can, of course, but they have to pay €1,000 to move on, and obviously people who are working in meat plants don't have €1,000 to move on to someplace else, and that sort of would imply that another meat plant would take them, and that doesn't appear to be the practice.
And do you know what the rules are around sick pay? Because it seems that some of them weren't sure what their entitlements were.
Well, I mean, everybody, I suppose, is entitled to statutory sick pay, but I mean, sick pay, that kicks in after a number of days, but it's up to an individual employer for the first couple of days. And when the Meat Industry Ireland were first before the committee on the 10th of July, they were able to say how many of their members pay sick pay. When they came back again on the 30th of August, they were able to confirm that they said that 20%, approximately 20% of the meat plants, now not every meat plant in Ireland is affiliated to Meat Industry Ireland, but of those that were, 20% were paying sick pay. Now, I should say that on the 13th of August, we had the Health and Safety Authority in. We had them in on the 10th of May at our very first meeting, and they were only starting inspections then because they were saying that they didn't have the protocols. 13th of August, they'd carried out 39 inspections, but 30 of them were pre-announced. I mean, this is at a time that on the July bank holiday weekend, there were 6,000 inspections of licensed premises by An Garda Síochána. So, I mean, there's a huge disparity between the state resources being put into inspecting meat plants where there are clusters, where there have been repeatedly been clusters, and where there are clusters in other jurisdictions right across the world.
But you heard what Meat Industry Ireland had to say to us today. They welcome unannounced inspections. They say they've no problem with that. And also, this is an interesting point that they make, that the number of clusters has reduced from 22 in mid-May to 4, and they say that's proof that the measures they have taken are working.
I mean, I have to say that the testimony which we heard from workers there didn't sound like the testimony of people who were confident that their workplace was in any way a safe place to work, and it wasn't the testimony of workers who are working in an environment which is paying due regard to the dangers of COVID. I mean, 3 whole counties were locked down because of clusters in meat plants. One of them is still locked down because of clusters which originated in meat plants. And then we hear this testimony here today. I mean, it does beg a lot of questions about how exactly the meat authorities the meat plants are treated in such a special manner by state authorities. And this isn't just with regard to workers. I mean, farmers, food production was deemed to be an essential service, and rightly so, but we have to bear in mind that meat plants don't produce food, they process food. And meat plants, when this pandemic was at its height, were paying farmers $3.40 per kilo for meat. Now, that's almost 20% below what Teagasc say is the cost of production. At the same time as they were doing that, they were killing, according to Department of Agriculture figures, by August of this year, they had killed 95% of the numbers that they had killed the previous year.
Just to clarify,
farmers considerably less, and they were claiming the temporary wage subsidy scheme. So something is going on. And farm bodies have repeatedly made complaints to the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, and there's a really interesting article by The Currency which showed that in response to that complaint, they investigated just about everybody except the meat plants. So, I mean, they do seem to operate in a very special place in Ireland, and I don't know why.
The HSA tells us that 59 inspections took place between May and August. Will you bring them back in on the foot of what you've heard?
Bring who back in?
The meat industry.
Well, I mean, there have been calls to set up a task force. I mean, I'm happy to bring them back in again, but it's not for me. It's the committee as a whole make decisions on who to bring in, which organisations to bring in. I'm certainly happy to facilitate them coming back in again, but I'm not going to preempt what the committee will do. But there have been calls by Holly Cairns and others for a task force to look into the meat industry and how it operates in Ireland, not just with regard to how it treats its workers, which is hugely important. And it's appalling that any workers should be brought to Ireland to be exploited if that is what's happening, and that's certainly what it sounds like.
We've got to leave it there. Michael McNamara, thank you for joining us on the programme today.